All right, in this unit, we're going to learn a little bit more about building databases. In Unit 1, in the first part of it, you got a kind of an idea of how databases are built, and they're fields, they're made up of fields, they're made up of records, there's a primary key, you learned how to enter some data, and you learn some relatively short ways or quick ways of building these databases. In this unit, we're going to go into another way of doing it that is a little more in-depth. Gives you some more control over how fields display, over default values, and a few other things that we're going to take a look at. I don't think it's a whole lot more complicated than it was last time. If anything, it may be a little simpler because it's all kind of in one place. But a lot of it's going to be very much the same. The book starts out talking about how to design databases. And honestly, this doesn't belong in this class. If they wanted you to design databases, then they should have you designing databases in the tutorials. They should have you designing databases in the quizzes and all the stuff that you're doing online in the exams, and they don't do any of that. So this is all theory. And I think, as I've mentioned in another class, database design is a 2-credit class. So it's not a 1 unit. It's a 2-credit class. And they've consolidated nicely down into these few pages here, but I don't think it covers it very well. It does cover it very well, but just way too brief, and in your case, too much. So what I'm going to do is just give you some of the highlights from those, and then we're just going to get right into the meat of this stuff here. First of all, when you pick table names, you want to pick clear table names. You don't want to pick table 1, table 2, table 3. Makes sense, because if you need to go from one table to another, the names really help you get around there. Short text for each one of the short text fields. And so I'm kind of flying through this stuff here. Group fields here, they're telling you how to design. How do you know which fields go into which tables? You know what? That's a complicated question. Very complicated question. How do you know which tables you need? For this class, you simply do what they tell you. Put these fields in this table. These tables are related in this way. Right? So we're not going to talk too much about that. Got to figure out a primary key. Guess what? You don't have to figure out a primary key. The book tells you this one, make it the primary key. If they're going to tell you all this stuff, I don't know why they go through so much of the theory. Got to have a common field and related tables. We're going to do that. Field properties. When you're designing your fields, most fields are going to be short text. They allow you to type in text. However, to make your databases more efficient, you should set an appropriate size. And I'm going to show you how to do that tonight. All right, last time, we simply took the default, which is 255 characters. That's really great for a state code. That's never more than 2. Or for a student ID number that's never more than 8. Why would I set the size to 255? Today's databases, it still makes a difference. I've created one of these databases with all the field sizes at 255. Inserted 10,000 random records. Did it again with all the field size set properly, and the database was smaller. I'd say significantly, 15% smaller. Is that significant? Almost to me. It's smaller. So it makes sense to set the field sizes, especially for your short text fields, to the right types. Here's all the different types, or at least the most popular ones. We'll see them today. We just talked about setting field sizes. We are also going to set a caption for every field. This is for humans, not for us access experts and programmers. We like our names all smushed together, camel case where the first letter is capitalized of every word, but no spaces in between. The first editions of this book didn't do that. They put spaces in between everything. Somewhere along the way, the programmers yelled at them and said, don't do that. It gets people into a bad habit that we then have to clean up later. However, humans like to see spaces. So when we look at this data, we like to see spaces, even though the field names shouldn't have them. Captions allow us to have both. So we're going to learn how to do that. And here's how you create a table in Design View. So I'm on page 59. It's kind of where I'm starting, and we're going to follow along. Once again, I have all my steps kind of written down in a separate way, so I have them on a separate page. So if I'm not following the book example exactly, it's kind of on purpose. And now my notes are terrible. What's the problem? Last time we created tables by, actually one was created for us. And then we use the toolbar buttons. If I'm not, you don't have to follow here. I'm just going to go to design view. And then we used a bunch of toolbar buttons and modified stuff. Went to home and actually we weren't even in design view or in data. This is called data sheet view. That's where we were last week. And then we used these field buttons to define the fields in our database. And that's not bad. All right, but what I want to do is show you a different way. And that's what you're going to be using. And it's a little more concise. So what I'd like you to do is go to the Create tab. If you opened Visits with me, you can close it. Go to the Create tab, and we're going to build a table in Design View. It'll help if I turn the lights down a little bit. I'm going to create a table in Design View, so go ahead and click on it. Get an empty table definition. Unlike the one we got before, where we had already had a primary key and had all this other stuff, this one we get an empty table definition. And what we have to do is for every field, provide its name, provide its type, maybe provide a description. And then depending on the type, down here there's going to be some properties, some field properties that we have to fill in. And those we didn't do in the last one. In the last one, we picked a field, we picked a type, done. Had no options for descriptions, really didn't have any options for sizes or other stuff that we're going to see today. The first field we want to create is the invoice number. We're going to abbreviate that invoice num. No spaces. Its data text or data type is short text, and notice that's the default, so you don't have to do anything. The book asks you to add a description to this called primary key. This is English here. Descriptions are for, again, humans or actually other database programmers. This is a description of this field. I don't terribly agree with that, but we don't have much choice because you're taking automated tests, and if they tell you to put primary key in the description, then you have to put primary key in the description. Personally, I think that's a waste of space. And there are better uses for the description, and I will show them to you when we get a little further along. But again, the book says put it in there, put it in there. Notice now that we have a data type of short text down at the bottom of the screen. Under the General tab, there's a field size, there's a format, there's an input mask, there's a caption, there's a default value, there's a bunch of other stuff we're not going to use yet. To get down there, you can just grab your mouse and click, or you can press the F6 key on your keyboard. And you jump right down there. And not only that, whoa, a little extra stuff on mine, sorry. Not only that, but the 255 is already highlighted, right? Almost never do you put a field size of 255. That's a small paragraph. Not likely. For this one, the book says make it size 5. This invoice number does not have a format, so I'm going to press the tab key to move down. Does not have a mask. We're not going to be using masks here. It's an intermediate topic. But the book does ask us to put captions on just about every one of our fields. Any field that's made up of 2 words where they're smushed together, in the caption you put the same words or any words that you want with the space. Now we're making the programmers happy because the field names don't have spaces. But as you'll see in a little while, the humans get to see spaces in their field names. If we were to create a report or a form from this, they would be labeled invoice space number instead of invoice number, all smushed together. If we wanted to, we could even add the BER there. The book doesn't, so I don't want to get terribly confused, but you can change the caption to whatever you want, and on any future forms, queries, reports, even data sheet view, the column headings have spaces in them now. So it's a nice compromise. It's a bit tedious because you have to give the field a name and then basically give it the same caption with an extra space or 2. But it's a good compromise to make everybody happy. Now we're done with this field. We've completely defined it according to the book's definition. Now we want to do another one. There is no easy way to get back up here. You could press F6. I think it takes 5 or 6 times till you get back to the right place, so that's kind of painful. So the book recommends you simply grab your mouse, click in the field name for the next field. This field is a visit ID. Notice we already have a visits table. Wait a minute, do you have a billing table? I just realized I seem to remember you had a billing table there. In yours, is there a billings table over here? There is? Yes? No? Yes. Julia, no. If you have one. Let's, oh geez, now I made a mess. See if you can right click and delete it. Try it on the billings table, because that's what we're creating right now. The table that I put up on the iDrive, I stole from Bob. They must have built it this morning. So try to delete the billings table if you got one, because we're creating it right now. After a quick break, this is supposed to be visit ID. It is also short text, and it has a description of foreign key. Did we talk about that last week? Val doesn't remember. Doesn't mean I didn't talk about it, but Val doesn't remember. A foreign key is simply means that this field is also in a different table someplace, a foreign table, not a German table, just a different table, like the visits table, and it's the primary key there. I don't like the word foreign key. A bunch of database geniuses dreamed them up once upon a time. What that really is a linking field. It links 2 tables together. In order for 2 tables to link and share in a relational database, I know we talked about that, they have to have fields in common. And we're going to see that today. So I prefer linking field, but once again, that automated grading system, if you don't put foreign key in there, you're going to get dinged, and we don't want that. So you're a little smarter than the book. F6. Mine still keeps going. Go away. Okay. F6 takes you down here. Mine's not working quite as well as I wanted to. And we're supposed to make it size 4 with a caption of visit space ID. These captions are going to get real tedious real fast in your homework assignments, but they're worthwhile for everybody, and they are required. So visit ID is done. After visit ID, we're going to create an invoice amount. AMT, abbreviated. Now it is not short text, it's an amount. It's the currency type. You could drop down the list and pick currency, but most of the different types have their own unique letter, like C. If you just type C with short text highlighted, it'll fill in the rest for you. So you don't have to grab the mouse, drop it down, do all the rest of that stuff. Okay, now you can F6 or you can click down here, but as soon as press enter just to lock that in. Notice that the field properties down at the bottom of the screen are different. Currency fields don't have a size, they're a fixed size. It already has a format, currency. That means it's going to display with dollar signs and commas and stuff. And it has an automated number of decimal places. So if you need 1, you get 1. If you need 0, you get 0. That's kind of lame. Most of the time, we change that to 2 decimal places. And again, follow the instructions in the book, but most of the time they change it to 2 decimals so that if it's a $2 invoice amount, we get 2.00 instead of just a 2. So that's a good idea. One of the things they don't have you change is the default value. Why would an invoice amount, a default value is a value that's put in automatically for you, so you don't have to type it. Like if we were putting in somebody's address for the school here, their state is almost always Wisconsin, so why don't we just fill that in? Default value, Wisconsin. Their campus is always Stevens Point. Why don't we just fill that in? Why are we filling in 0 for the invoice amount? I don't know. I wouldn't do it. But in your homework assignment, don't mess with it. It's already there. They don't ask you to take it out. I doubt they're checking it, but I wouldn't take it out just because Volker said he doesn't like them. Want a caption? Invoice space amount, AMT. Again, you don't have to abbreviate. You could type the whole thing in there. Pretty soon we're going to have an example where we do that. All right, next one, invoice date. One word up here. It's a date time field, just press D. Oops, one D is enough. I messed it up. There we go. Again, no description. But if you press enter, once again, stuff down there has changed. There's no decimal places, there's no width. This is a date field. What we do get to do with a date field is set its format. How do you want dates to appear in datasheet view, in forms, in reports? How do you want them to appear? There are some predefined date formats. A general date, which also includes a time. There's a long date, which includes the day of the week. You might remember these from Access, right? There's even a medium date that's pretty lame looking. Most people like the short date. But you can even, if you wish, create a custom date. To create a custom date, you have to know some special codes. For right now, let's click short date. And then I'm going to switch to the notes and hopefully go to the right page, page 65. And on page 65, it gives you the codes that you can use to create a custom date. Now these codes are kind of funky looking, except to programmers. They've seen them before. These are very similar. There's a single D. If you put a single D in your date code, you will get the day of the month. Today's the 10th. But if today had been the 9th, you would not get a leading 0 because there's only a single D. If you add a second D, 2 little D's to your code, and then you get a leading 0. If you add a third D, you get the 3-letter abbreviation for the day of the week, Sunday through Saturday. Add a fourth D, you get the full day of the week. And you can mix and match these and create all kinds of goofy formats. The book sticks to some pretty basic ones. W is for week, day of the week. I don't usually worry about those, or day of the year. M for month, same thing. Single digit. Single digits get leading 0s. Abbreviation for the month, and the full month name. Years only come in 2 flavors, either 2 digits or 4. Poker's advice, always use 4 digits. Better advice, follow what the book does. So let's create a custom format. There's a special format, an international standard format, that starts with a 4-digit year. So let's type that in there. The book is not going to be checking us here, so the fact that we've got our years formatted differently is only going to get us in trouble with the Microsoft police if they show up. So close the door, we'll be okay. After that comes the month, but there's always a leading 0 in the ISO format, International Standard Format. This is one that everybody across the world is supposed to be able to understand. We like 11/10/2014. In Germany, it would be 10/11/2014. How confusing is that? They put the day first, then the month, then the year, which really makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So stupid Americans that do it inside out, month, day, then year. So we get medium size, then the little stuff, then the big. Anyways, to make everybody happy, this ISO format was created, and it's followed by 2 little D's. And that's all you have to do. Put in whatever characters you want in those special codes that were on page 69 or whatever that was, 65. M's, D's, and Y's. Just for grins, add 1 more D. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. Change the caption to invoice date. And then we've got 1 more field, and that's invoice paid. It's a yes/no field. Remember, that's a yes, no, true, false type thing. So you just type a Y and you get a yes/no field. And all we get here, once you press enter, there's not much you can do to yes/no fields. You can change their format, but normally we don't. Let's just give it a caption, invoice, let's cheat, INV paid. We could just put paid in there. You can put anything you want in the caption. Whatever you put in the caption is going to show up next when we go to datasheet view. But before we go to datasheet view, there's one other thing you must do for every table, and that's designate its primary key. Remember, the primary key is the field that contains unique values for every record. The book tells you which ones they are. They are almost always the first field. To make invoice number the primary key, there's two ways to do it. Select it, first of all. And then notice the big key up here. I wonder what that does. If you don't like moving your mouse that far, you can right-click and make it a primary key here. When you do, a little key shows up in the left-hand selector column designating that this is the primary key field. Access will no longer allow you to put duplicate records or duplicate values in that field. Let's go to Datasheet View. This is called Design View, by the way. Table Design View, and this is Datasheet View. Whenever you're in Design View, this button takes you to Datasheet View. When you do that, you'll be asked if you want to save the structure, this is called, of the database. Answer is yes. And we want to call this the billing table. If you already have one, just put an S on it or something. Press enter or click on OK. And now we have a table. Let's resize the column so that we can see all the column headers. So I'm going to click the gray box in the upper left. And then the column edge of any column, double click it, and it resizes them all. Notice the spaces: visit space ID, invoice space amount, invoice abbreviated space paid. All the captions that you designate get put on the column headings so that we humans can see them, but those names behind the scenes don't have spaces, make the programmers happy. Note, the invoice amount is started off at 0. I think that's crazy. It's easy to fix. You just take the 0 out. But the book doesn't do it, and if you do it, I'm afraid what's going to happen to you on the test, so don't do it. What if we make a mistake? We can go back to Design View. Notice the Table View button now has changed. It's a triangle now. That's for Design View. That's pretty consistent. Later on, we're going to create queries. There'll be Query Design View and Datasheet View. There'll be Forms and Design View and Report View and Form View. So they all use the same symbol. You click on it, you go back to Design View. And now we can manipulate some of this stuff. After looking at it, the boss says, you know what, I want the invoice amount below the invoice date. So we have two choices. We can either move the invoice date up or the invoice amount down. I'm going to move the invoice date up. I'm going to select its row. Use the little row selector at the end of the row, and then simply drag it up and you'll get a black line until it sits between visit ID and invoice amount. Now you don't have to follow, but just to prove it to you, I'm going to go back to Design View and notice now they flipped. So whatever we do in the structure in Design View reflects in Datasheet View. We missed a field. We want to insert it, and the boss said put it before invoice paid. All Microsoft products except PowerPoint. All Microsoft products insert before. So if I want to insert before invoice paid, I click on invoice paid, and there's I right-click, excuse me, and there's an insert rows. We could also have gone to that insert rows up there, either one. So let's insert a row. And this field is supposed to be called invoice item. It's a short text field. What else? Size 40 with the appropriate caption. So come down here. I'm going to use my mouse because my keyboard's being funky. Feel free to use F6 to jump from up here down to there. Size 40, caption, invoice, item. So we just added a field. So once your structure is done, you can move stuff around. And you can even do this after you've added 10,000 records. You can add another field. It'll be blank in every one of your 10,000 records, but you can add it. You can delete a field. If you delete it, it will wipe out all of the data, and there's no recovery from that, even an undo. So be very careful when you're deleting fields that you're deleting the right ones. I don't think you can undo it. I'm too chicken to try it. Okay, let's see, using the Fields tab. Okay, let's go back to Datasheet View. So up here with this button, switch back and forth. Got to save it. Okay, save it. It's asking you to save the structure. Remember from last week, when we start typing data in here, and we will, when we start typing data in here, we want to make sure, or we don't have to save. When we leave the record, it automatically saves. That's not true for structure and layout if we change the field sizes again here. So I'm going to click and make my invoice item fit. We can do that. Now, since we've used Design View to build this, some people think that they can't use the Fields tab, so click on the Fields tab to change things, but you can. You can still use them to do some fine-tuning, but for those of us who've been using Access for years, I forget they're even there. I just go right back to Design View and tweak things. Sorry, I opened the wrong table. Close that. You want to save the layout? Yes. And let's open the Visits table. And here it's got a bunch of stuff, and here's the visit date. Make sure you're in the Fields tab. And I'm going to click the visit date header up here. There's no format. We could go to Design View and change the format, or you can change it right here, as long as you don't want a custom one, because I don't think you can type a custom in there. We want a short date. So I open the Visits table. You in Visits? You don't have a Visits table? You're right there. All right, the rest of you choose short date. Now they want us to go to Design View in the Visits table, so we click the triangle just like before, and notice here's the design. And notice my visit ID has a field size of 255. Because when we built this in the first unit, we didn't change those things. We already have a primary key, but they want us to add the words primary key out here. That's just so lame. But that's all right, we'll do it. Change the caption to visit ID. Ben's checking and everything's already done. Change the size to 4. For patient ID, it is a foreign key. In other words, a linking field. It's got a bad size. Size is supposed to be 5. And we better change the caption. Notice what I mean about tedious. If I don't have you do all this, then I have to do it offline, and then I have to give you a copy for next week so that everything's ready and we see what happens there. We get Bob's instead of mine. All right, for the visit date. We already changed it to short date. Notice that whatever we did before in the Fields view is already done here. So we don't have to worry about that. But the book does want a caption of date of visit. So here's an example where the caption is quite a bit different. Flipped it around, add the word of, and so on. The caption can be whatever you want it to be. Reason is designated as short text. Need to change it to size 60. And for the caption now, we're actually going to make it bigger. This is pretty rare. Reason/diagnosis. So the caption can be larger if that's what you need to make it clear. Behind the scenes for the programmer, nice, short, sweet name, reason, and we're done. For the walk-in, it's a yes/no field. Not much we can do except add a caption with an apostrophe, walk in, and even a question mark. You can add question marks to your captions, and they will show up when we go back to table view. Let's go back to table view temporarily. So go to data sheet view, Save it, yes, because we made some changes. Now, this is a common warning. You're getting a warning saying, hey, you shrunk some of these down. Like the patient ID used to be 255 and you made it 4. Are you sure you know what you're doing? It's just a warning. It was a stupid size to begin with, so yes, I know what I'm doing. The answer to this is always yes for the purposes of this unit. In the real world, maybe take a quick look and make sure that you're not chopping anything off. If you make the field too short, like 2 instead of 4, it'll chop off any characters that are too long. And then you're really in trouble. It's another one of those things that can't be undone. Once again, I'm going to click the little triangle in the upper left-hand corner, double-click any column heading to make them fit. Notice the question mark, notice the reason diagnosis, etc. Let's close the visits table. You want to save the layout? Yes. And now we're going to go into billings. I'm going to double click and we're going to put some data in. Unfortunately, I'm going to make you type 5 records because if you don't do it, I got to do it. We need these 5 to make everything match. We've already resized the column headers so that we can read them. That's sometimes important. So now we start typing in data. For the first invoice number, it's 35801. It's not already there. Ben, do you have any records in there at all? Okay. 35801. And then remember, we just press tab to move over to the visit ID 1527. Tab. For the invoice date, in the book it says 11/10, which is today's date. That's interesting. 2015. Remember that you don't have to type the 2000. Microsoft Access will take any date that is a 2-digit date less than 30. I wonder how long this is going to last. Last time I checked, it was less than 30, and it makes it 2000. So if we press tab, it makes it 2000. Notice the funky date format? That's because of our special format. After we're done with this, we'll go fix it. Notice the TUE. That's because we put 3 Ds in instead of 2. 4-digit year, 2-digit month. We'll fix that. Invoice amount is 0. The good news is, even though it's a stupid default, it's highlighted. So we don't have to press delete. You just start typing it, it'll replace it. And the value, am I in the right column? I got no numbers here for invoice amounts. Why did I do that? We'll have to come back. Just leave it 0. Invoice item. Actually, maybe I can just bring them up in the book here. Hang on a second. If you happen to be at home trying to follow along, these are on page 78, excuse me. So the invoice amount for the first one, let's highlight that, is $100. Notice you don't have to type the $sign. You don't have to type any decimal places. When we leave, the format that we specified adds those. Invoice item is an office visit. Lowercase v, does it matter? Not much, but consistency does help. Invoice paid. I'm using the keyboard. How do I change that? Spacebar. If you're on the invoice paid, press the spacebar to check it. And now I'm ready for the next record. Press tab. And here I have a 35818. I keep forgetting you can't see what's on the screen over here. 35818. The visit ID is 1536. The date format, or the date, excuse me, is 11/18/15. 18/15. And it's still doing stupid stuff, so you know what? I'm getting sick of looking at it. Let's see if we can fix it real quick. I'm going to click in the date column, go to the fields, and there's that goofy format. Let's change it to short date. You notice it took out that one that I was on, but it left the other ones alone. Whoa. Sorry, pressed the wrong key. 2536 11/18/15. And now notice that it automatically expands the year. The amount for this one is the same. Now here's a shortcut that can really sometimes come in handy. If you want to copy the amount from the previous row, you press Control quotes on your keyboard, and it just makes a copy. This was also an office visit, so Control quotes, it makes a copy, and you don't have to type them. If you forget that, then you do more typing, that's all. And this one was also an invoice paid. All right, next one, 35885. $15.70 for the ID. $112.16 for the year or the date. The amount's $85, and the reason is pharmacy. Has not been paid. Last one, 35851. Remember, that's our primary key. I'm going to make a mistake. You leave yours, 851, right? Is that what I said? Yep. I'm going to make a mistake and put in my 35885 again. Notice right now, no complaints. 1550. Date is 12/2/15. The amount was 85. Copy it, control quotes. The reason, pharmacy, control quotes. And the invoice is not paid. But now watch what happens. When you press tab at the end, yours is going to work. But watch what happens when you have a duplicate key. I get an error message. The changes you requested were not successful because they would create duplicate values in the primary key. So something's wrong here. So at this point, I look back and I say, oh, it's supposed to be 85. Ooh, what did I do? Okay, I'm going to click and change it to 51 and then click off the line and it's saved. So if you accidentally type the same one twice, you'll get an error. Now let's take that break. When we come back, we'll do some more stuff. Close that billing table. When we come back, we'll pick up from there.